Hey everyone! It's your boy Chinnu here, and today we've got something special lined up for you, the 4-card deck challenge. I'm super excited to show you what went down in these matches, so make sure you stay tuned until the end because you're going to see some epic plays, some close calls, and yes, even a couple of hilarious fails. That's what makes Clash Royale so fun, you never know what's going to happen next. For those of you unfamiliar with the 4-card deck challenge, here's a quick breakdown. Normally, in Clash Royale, you get to build a deck of 8 cards, but in this challenge, we limit it to just 4. That's right, only 4 cards to take into battle. It may sound simple, but trust me, it makes the game way more intense. You have to be super strategic with your elixir management, pick cards that work well together, and be ready to adapt on the fly. Every decision counts when you've only got 4 cards in your deck. So, without further ado, let's dive into the action and see how I did. Alright, so for my first game, I decided to roll with a fast cycle deck. My lineup is Mini P.E.K.K.A, Arrows, Skeleton Barrel, and Dart Goblin. This is a quick deck with the goal of keeping constant pressure on my opponent, making them react to my moves while I maintain control. The Mini P.E.K.K.A is my heavy hitter here. If I can get him to connect with the enemy's tower, that's going to do some serious damage. The Skeleton Barrel provides some chip damage and distraction, while the Dart Goblin stays in the back, dealing damage from a distance. And of course, I've got arrows to clear out any swarms or low-health troops my opponent might throw at me. Right off the bat, I send out my Mini P.E.K.K.A. And wow, that first hit is always so satisfying. One swing from the Mini P.E.K.K.A, and my opponent's tower is already feeling the pain. My Skeleton Barrel follows up, flying in and dropping a bunch of skeletons right on top of the enemy's defenses. Meanwhile, my Dart Goblin is just chilling in the back, picking off whatever troops my opponent tries to send out. It's a great combo because it forces my opponent to split their attention. Do they deal with the Mini P.E.K.K.A first, or do they try to stop the Skeleton Barrel before it pops? Either way, they're going to be in trouble. This is what I love about fast cycle decks. The pressure is constant, and if your opponent isn't ready, you can snowball them into a loss before they even know what's happening. The best part is that because it's a low-cost deck, I can cycle through my cards quickly, which keeps my opponent on their toes. After a few more well-timed plays, my Mini P.E.K.K.A connects with their tower again, and boom, the tower is down. It's always a great feeling to take down the first tower, especially when it happens so quickly. At this point, I'm feeling pretty confident. I've got the momentum, and my opponent is struggling to keep up. I continue to apply pressure with my Dart Goblin and Skeleton Barrel, and after a few more pushes, the game is over. Clean win, no problem at all. The first game ends with me taking the victory, and honestly, it felt great to start off on such a high note. But, of course, Clash Royale has a way of humbling you, and that brings us to the second game. Now, in Game 2, I stuck with the same deck, hoping for another quick win. But things didn't go quite as planned. This time, my opponent had a strong defense ready for me. Right from the start, they managed to counter my Mini P.E.K.K.A and Skeleton Barrel with ease. Every time I tried to make a move, they had the perfect card to shut me down. It's one of those matches where nothing seems to go your way, and you can feel the game slipping out of your control. By the midway point, I realized I was in trouble. My Dart Goblin kept getting picked off before it could deal any real damage, and my Skeleton Barrel was barely making it to their side of the arena. Meanwhile, my opponent was playing a slow, methodical game, building up elixir and preparing for a massive counter-push. Sure enough, they hit me hard with a strong combo, and before I knew it, I had lost all 3 of my towers. Not a single one of my opponent's towers took any damage. Brutal. Sometimes you just have to laugh at how quickly things can go wrong in Clash Royale. One minute you're in control, and the next, you're completely wiped out. That's exactly what happened here. My opponent had a perfect defense, and I just couldn't break through. The game ended with me getting 3 crowned, and it was definitely a humbling experience. But that's the beauty of Clash Royale, every loss is a chance to learn and improve. So, what went wrong in this game? Well, for starters, I didn't adapt quickly enough to my opponent's strategy. I kept trying the same moves, hoping something would stick, but they had an answer for everything. I also wasn't managing my elixir as efficiently as I could have. Instead of waiting for the right moment to strike, I kept spending elixir on pushes that didn't really go anywhere. Lesson learned. Alright, after that rough loss, I knew I had to switch things up for the next match. For Game 3, I decided to try a new deck. This time, I went with Inferno Tower, Wall Breakers, Arrows, and Royal Recruits. This deck gives me a little more balance between offense and defense. The Inferno Tower is my main defensive card, capable of taking down big tanky units like Golem and P.E.K.K.A. The Wall Breakers provide some quick offense, and if they connect with the tower, they deal massive damage. The Royal Recruits help me control both lanes, and of course, I've still got arrows to handle any swarms. Right from the start, I could tell this deck was a better fit for the challenge. My opponent tried to send out a big push with a heavy tank, but my Inferno Tower melted it down before it could even reach my side of the arena. That's what makes the Inferno Tower such a strong card. If you time it right, it can completely shut down even the most powerful units. While my Inferno Tower was holding down the defense, I sent out my Wall Breakers for a quick push, and they managed to connect with the tower, dealing some serious damage. My opponent was forced to play defensively, and that gave me the opportunity to build up my elixir and plan my next move. After a few more exchanges, I sent out the Royal Recruits to apply pressure on both lanes, and it worked like a charm. My opponent was overwhelmed, and I was able to take down their tower for the win. It was a much closer match than the first game, but I managed to pull through with a well-deserved victory. This deck was working great for me, so I decided to stick with it for the next match. For Game 4, I used the same deck, and it played out in a similar way. My Inferno Tower held the line against their big pushes, while my Wall Breakers kept the pressure on their towers. The Royal Recruits gave me control of both lanes, forcing my opponent to spread their defenses thin. After a back-and-forth battle, I managed to secure another win. It wasn't easy, but the strategy worked, and I was able to close out the game with one tower standing. I could tell my opponent was playing a more defensive strategy. They were holding back, waiting for me to make the first move. So, I decided to play it smart and wait for the right opportunity. My plan was to use my wall breakers to apply pressure on one lane while keeping my Inferno Tower ready to defend against any big pushes they might try. The early game was pretty quiet, both of us were just feeling each other out, not committing too much. But then, my opponent dropped a big tanky unit, and that was my cue. I placed my Inferno Tower in the middle of the arena, and sure enough, it started melting their tank before it could even cross the bridge. With their big push neutralized, I sent out my wall breakers for a quick counterattack, and they connected with the tower, dealing some solid damage. From that point on, I kept the pressure up. My royal recruits gave me control of both lanes, and my Inferno Tower continued to hold strong against their big pushes. It was a back and forth match, but I could tell I had the upper hand. Eventually, I was able to break through their defenses and take down their tower for the win. Another victory with one tower left standing, and I was feeling pretty good about how things were going. At this point, I had won 3 games in a row with this deck, and I was ready to keep the momentum going. For the next match, I stuck with the same deck. After all, if it's working, why change it, right? My strategy remained the same: defend with the Inferno Tower, apply pressure with the wall breakers, and use the royal recruits to control both lanes. This game was a little more intense than the previous ones. My opponent was playing aggressively, constantly sending out big pushes and trying to overwhelm me. But thanks to my Inferno Tower, I was able to hold them off. The key here was patience. I didn't rush my attacks or try to force a win. Instead, I focused on defending until I saw an opening to counterattack. Eventually, my wall breakers found that opening, and they connected with the tower, dealing massive damage. I followed up with the royal recruits to apply pressure on both lanes, and my opponent just couldn't keep up. Another win in the books, and I was feeling unstoppable. Now, let's talk about the final match of the day. By this point, I had won 4 games in a row with this deck, and I was ready for one last showdown. My opponent was tough, but I stayed focused on my game plan: defend with the Inferno Tower, push with the wall breakers, and overwhelm with the royal recruits. The early game was pretty even, both of us were playing carefully, not wanting to make any mistakes. But as the game progressed, I was able to build up an elixir advantage and make a big push. With that, the 4-card deck challenge comes to an end, and I have to say, it was a lot of fun. The challenge really forces you to think critically about your card choices and how you play each match. Win or lose, there's always something to learn, and I'm glad I was able to pull off so many wins. Now, before we wrap things up, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss another video.